Solomon's wives. Who were they? Solomon, heir to King David, is often remembered as one of the wisest rulers in the history of Israel. His reputation, marked by wisdom and wealth, was built not only by his actions, but also by the decisions he made throughout his life. Among the most notable and, at the same time, controversial features of his career, the number of women he had by his side stands out. According to the biblical accounts, Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, totaling 1,000 women in his court. This data goes beyond a simple expression of the practice of polygamy prevalent at the time. It reflects significant cultural and political aspects of that period, evidencing how marriages were used strategically to consolidate alliances, strengthen power, and promote harmony between neighboring kingdoms. However, more than the numbers, the essential thing is to understand who these women were and how they impacted Solomon's life and government. Solomon's wives and their role in Israeli politics. Solomon's wives played a strategic role in consolidating Israel's power, acting as diplomatic links between the kingdom and other nations. The king's numerous marriages were not just personal commitments, but essential instruments in the politics of the time, when alliances were strengthened through family ties. Each marriage represented a new political connection and added complexity to the administration of the kingdom. Among these alliances, his marriage to the daughter of the Egyptian pharaoh stands out, an event of great significance. This union symbolized the alliance between two of the most powerful kingdoms of the time, Israel and Egypt, with the aim of ensuring peace and strengthening economic and diplomatic ties. The Egyptian princess brought with her cultural and religious aspects of her people, influencing life in Solomon's court and also some of his administrative practices. In addition to Egypt, Solomon married women from several other peoples, including Moabites, Ammonites, Sidonians, and Hittites. These unions expanded the network of international alliances, offering commercial and military benefits. Each marriage was not only a political agreement, but also an exchange of traditions, cultures, and customs. Foreign wives introduced their religious beliefs and practices, which gradually began to influence the king himself and the destiny of the kingdom. The cultural impact of these alliances was profound. Solomon's wives, coming from regions with varied religious practices, brought with them their gods and rituals. Initially tolerated, these customs became part of the routine of the court. Altars and temples dedicated to foreign deities were built, demonstrating how the king's political decisions affected the spirituality of the kingdom. In the context of Israel, where fidelity to the one God was essential to national identity, this religious diversity became a challenge. The coexistence of distinct practices, which reflected Solomon's diplomacy, generated internal tensions. Biblical passages warn of the dangers of allowing external influences to shape decisions central to the spiritual life of the people. The significant number of wives, traditionally described as 700 wives and 300 concubines, underscores the political nature of Solomon's alliances. However, this diversity also brought difficulties in terms of management and division of priorities, diverting the king's spiritual focus. Each union represented a direct connection with a foreign people and the introduction of elements that challenged the religious unity of Israel. Foreign women not only shaped the politics and culture of the court, but also profoundly impacted Solomon's conduct. In one account in the Book of Kings, it is mentioned that the king's heart was gradually diverted by these influences. This reflects the concessions Solomon made to accommodate the religious practices of his wives and the effect of these choices on his leadership. Solomon's court became a mosaic of cultures, traditions, and influences. What should have been a symbol of power and grandeur ended up becoming a challenge to the spiritual identity of the kingdom. The introduction of new cults and the construction of altars represented not only a departure from the core values of Israel, but also an increase in the complexity of Solomon's rule. Solomon's concubines, influence and role in the kingdom. In addition to his 700 wives, Solomon had 300 concubines, who played a significant role in the dynamics of the court and in the king's personal and political life. Although they occupied a position of less prestige compared to the official wives, their presence contributed to the complexity and plurality of Solomon's reign. These women, who came from diverse social and cultural backgrounds, reflected both the political scope of the kingdom and the challenges of governing such a diverse territory. The concubines often came to court through less formal political alliances or were incorporated as a result of territorial conquests. Many were daughters of local leaders or tribal chiefs who, by offering their daughters, sought to strengthen ties with Israel and ensure Solomon's protection. Others were brought after military campaigns, symbolizing the submission of defeated peoples. This practice, common in the context of the time, transformed Solomon's court into a true cultural melting pot, where different traditions and values coexisted and, at times, came into conflict with Israelite practices. Although Solomon's wives occupied more formal and strategic positions, the concubines had a different type of relationship with the king. Because they were more accessible in everyday life, they developed a level of closeness that allowed them to directly influence Solomon. Known for his curiosity and interest in diverse cultures, Solomon probably used this interaction to expand his knowledge of the traditions and customs of different peoples. However, this proximity also brought challenges, since many of his concubines maintained religious practices and beliefs that clashed with the faith of Israel. The impact of these women was not only cultural, but also spiritual. They brought to the court cults dedicated to foreign deities such as Ashtoreth, Milcom, and other gods worshipped by their people. The Bible relates that Solomon, influenced by these women, allowed the construction of altars and temples to these deities. This attitude, considered a violation of the religious principles of Israel, marked a moment of spiritual crisis in the reign of the wise king. The coexistence with the concubines and the introduction of foreign religious practices generated far-reaching consequences. The temples built to please these women became symbols of external influence in Solomon's court. Previously unknown rituals began to be integrated into the life of the court, creating a spiritual duality that weakened the religious foundations of the kingdom. The Book of Kings records how Solomon's heart was gradually turned away as a result of his concessions to accommodate the beliefs of the women in his court. In addition to their religious impact, concubines played a key role in internal politics and the power structure. Many were mothers of the king's sons, which gave them a strategic position in the court hierarchy. Their descendants often competed for positions of influence and, eventually, for the right to succeed to the throne. These disputes generated tensions within the royal family and contributed to the administrative complexity of the kingdom. The plurality of Solomon's court, fueled by the cultural diversity brought by the concubines, also had an impact on the management of the kingdom. Each woman carried with her elements of her homeland, including traditions, customs, and beliefs that enriched, but also challenged, the cultural cohesion of Israel. Solomon's attempt to integrate so many different influences into his rule was both a demonstration of his power and a source of vulnerability. In a context where religious unity was central to the identity of the people of Israel, the introduction of foreign practices represented a breaking point. The challenge of maintaining fidelity to God while accommodating diplomatic and personal demands created a tension that was reflected in all aspects of his administration. The court, which should have been a symbol of glory and stability, became a space of spiritual and political conflict. Despite the challenges, Solomon's concubines contributed to expanding the diplomatic and cultural reach of the kingdom. Each of them represented a link to a distinct people or culture, enriching the king's worldview and the diversity of the court. However, this same diversity became a factor of disunity, weakening the core values that sustained the kingdom. Ultimately, the coexistence of these 300 women illustrates the duality of Solomon's reign. On the one hand, they were witnesses to his greatness and his skill in building alliances. On the other, they represented the price he paid for his diplomatic strategy. Solomon's court, with its complexity and diversity, is a reflection of a kingdom that attempted to integrate power, wisdom, and diplomacy, but faced the challenges of preserving its identity and spiritual values in the face of so many external influences. Women of foreign peoples and their gods. The foreign women who were part of Solomon's life brought with them much more than political alliances. They carried the spiritual traditions of their people, which ended up having a profound influence on the king's life. Solomon, who began his reign with a commitment to the solid relationship with the God of Israel, gradually deviated from this path due to the religious practices of these women. Among the foreign gods that came to be worshipped in Solomon's court were Ashtoreth, the Canaanite goddess of fertility, and Milcom, the supreme deity of the Moabites. These cults stood in sharp contrast to Israelite monotheism, representing a significant break with the values that had hitherto been central to the reign of Israel. The practices associated with these gods included rituals that ranged from public celebrations to sacrifices, directly challenging the exclusivity of the worship of the God of Israel. The influence of these women was especially noticeable in one figure, Solomon's Egyptian wife. As the daughter of the pharaoh, she brought with her not only political status but also the religious practices of Egypt. This union symbolized Solomon's attempt to cement alliances, but at the same time signified a spiritual commitment that contradicted Israelite precepts. The introduction of Egyptian cults into the court was one of the first visible signs of how these women influenced the king's spirituality. As time went on, Solomon allowed the religious practices of these women to be integrated into the life of the court, culminating in the construction of temples and altars to their gods. In 1 Kings, chapter 11, there is a clear account of how Solomon turned away from the God of Israel by adopting the cults promoted by his wives and concubines. These temples, often built in strategic locations, became landmarks of a cultural and religious transformation that divided the kingdom. The coexistence with women from foreign peoples proved to be a powerful force in Solomon's life, and he yielded to their influences. The worship of these gods was not just a private matter for the king, it had direct impacts on Israelite politics and society. The break with monotheism undermined the covenant that Israel had established with God, generating internal tensions and preparing the ground for the divisions that would occur after Solomon's reign. The temples built to foreign gods symbolized Solomon's deviation from the faith of his father, David, who had worked to establish the worship of the one God in Israel. These acts were seen as a spiritual betrayal that had profound consequences. Solomon, who began his reign with wisdom and faithfulness, ended his life marked by a break in the spiritual covenant that had sustained the kingdom. Foreign women represented both the cultural richness and the spiritual fragility of Solomon's reign. They brought with them practices that expanded the cultural horizons of the court, but also destabilized the religious foundations of Israel. Their gods and cults left their mark on the history of the people, as a reminder of the price that comes with religious and political syncretism. The humanity in Solomon's choices. Solomon's women were not merely distant figures in his life, they represented much more than just political and diplomatic alliances. Bursting with cultures, histories, and beliefs, these women shaped Solomon's reign in profound and multifaceted ways. Some came with promises of peace and stability, but over time, they revealed challenges that contributed to spiritual conflicts and imbalances in their journey with God. Solomon, though known for his great wisdom, was not immune to human fallibility. His relentless pursuit of knowledge and understanding led him to make mistakes that ultimately led him away from the devotion he sought. The women in his life, with their distinct beliefs and cultures, not only brought diversity but also challenges that tested the king's faith and integrity. Rather than remaining faithful to God, as his father David had, Solomon succumbed to these influences throughout his reign, allowing foreign religious practices to take hold. As complex as the roles of these women were, they should not be completely disregarded. They played a role in shaping the political, social, and cultural development of the Kingdom of Israel and had a significant impact on the king's life. Solomon's wives and concubines not only symbolized alliances, but also influenced decisions that shaped Israel's spiritual trajectory. Even Solomon, for all his wisdom, was human and subject to mistakes and failures, and the women of his time contributed to both the moments of success and the most difficult challenges of his reign. Solomon's story is therefore a reflection of the complexities of the human condition. His choices, which were driven by his search for peace and stability, were often marked by contradictions and decisions that revealed his humanity and fallibility. The women who were part of his life were not just symbols of power or diplomacy, but influences, who left deep marks on his trajectory, reinforcing the notion that Solomon's story is marked by human choices, both great and flawed. Lessons and reflections from the story of Solomon. The narrative of Solomon's women leads us to important reflections on the complexity of human relationships and the consequences of the choices we make throughout life. Solomon, known for his tireless search for wisdom, ended up giving in to external influences and the pressures of power. This contrast between his early wisdom and his later decisions reveals that true wisdom is not limited to knowledge or intellectual capacity, but includes discernment and fidelity to the essential values that sustain our identity. Solomon's wives and concubines, with their diverse cultures, traditions, and beliefs, played central roles in shaping the reign of Israel's wisest king. They contributed to the cultural richness of the court and to the consolidation of political alliances that were fundamental to the kingdom. However, the price of these alliances was high. Solomon learned, painfully, that pacts and relationships built with misguided motivations can lead to spiritual separation, weakening of faith, and ultimately, the fragmentation of that which should be preserved. This story, so ancient and yet so current, challenges each of us to reflect on the quality of our decisions. We are called to seek a wisdom that goes beyond the accumulation of information and experiences, a wisdom that enables us to distinguish what is temporary from what is permanent, what is superficial from what is essential. Solomon, although recognized for his wisdom, face the challenges of remaining faithful in the face of life's complexities and temptations, something that we all face in different ways. The choices we make, especially those influenced by external circumstances or outside pressures, can have profound and lasting repercussions. Solomon's reign teaches us that, no matter how great an achievement or how brilliant a plan, deviating from fundamental principles can compromise the greater purpose. His story is a warning about the dangers of prioritizing immediate interests or political conveniences over spiritual and moral integrity. Therefore, Solomon's journey is not only a historical account, but also a powerful life lesson. It invites us to seek wisdom that will illuminate our steps and strengthen us to resist external influences that can lead us away from our values. Discerning what is truly important, remaining faithful to what we believe, and choosing clearly are virtues that help us navigate the complexities of the world. May Solomon's story serve as an inspiration to each of us. As we reflect on his successes and failures, we are challenged not to let ourselves be carried away by the pressures of the moment. Instead, we are called to cultivate a wisdom that not only enriches us intellectually, but also leads us to a life guided by integrity, faith, and firmness in our deepest principles. Discover the value of true wisdom. Do not allow external influences to define your choices. Stand firm in your values and choose with discernment. Follow this space for more reflections and teachings on how to face life's challenges with faith and clarity. May we learn, together, to navigate the complexities of the world, remaining faithful to what really matters.